It is a warm night in May 2014. A shaky video is uploaded to Facebook that will send shockwaves through the music industry. The video is shot on a phone in a dimly lit studio. In the frame is the actor Tyrese Gibson, and next to him is the legendary rapper Dr. Dre. They are celebrating. They are shouting. They are drinking expensive Heineken beer. Tyrese looks into the camera and screams that the Forbes list has to change. He points to Dr. Dre and says, "The first billionaire in hip-hop is right here." Dre looks at the camera with a smug smile and nods. He knows something the rest of the world does not know yet. He knows that Apple is about to buy his headphone company Beats Electronics for $3.2 billion. It is the biggest acquisition in Apple history. It is the moment Dr. Dre becomes more than a rapper. He becomes a tycoon. But miles away from that celebration in a quiet office in California, another man is watching the news. He is an older man. He has a limp. He's not a rapper. He is not cool. He is an engineer named Noel Lee. He watches the news of the $3 billion deal, and he feels a sickness in his stomach. He is the man who designed the headphones. He is the man who engineered the sound. He is the man who built the prototypes with his own hands. And from this $3 billion deal, he will receive exactly $0. He has been erased from history. This is Alex from the Untold Path, where the rise and fall of legendary companies reveals how power shifts markets change and giants crumble overnight. To understand how the biggest heist in music history happened, we have to go back to a time before everyone walked around with big plastic bees on their ears. We have to go back to the early 2000s. In those days, if you saw someone wearing headphones, they were probably cheap foam pads that came with a Walkman, or they were the iconic white earbuds that came with the iPod. The audio world was boring. But Noel Lee was not boring. Noel Lee was an eccentric genius. He was the son of Chinese immigrants, and he had a passion for sound that bordered on obsession. In 1979, he founded a company called Monster Cable. Before Noel, people used cheap, flimsy wires to connect their expensive stereos. Noel realized that if you used thicker cables with better shielding, the sound was cleaner. He built a business empire on copper wire. He became the cable guy. He was wealthy, but he was invisible. Nobody cares about the cables behind the TV. They only care about the TV. Noel Lee wanted more. He wanted to be front and center. He looked at the iPod generation, and he was horrified. He saw millions of kids listening to compressed MP3 files through tiny, tinny earbuds. He felt that the music was being disrespected. He wanted to bring the power of a hi-fi system to a pair of headphones, so he went into his lab. He spent months experimenting with drivers and magnets and foam. He built a prototype. It was heavy, it was chunky, but it sounded like a thunderstorm. The bass was so thick you could feel it in your jaw. He called them the Monster headphones. He knew the engineering was perfect, but Noel Lee was smart enough to know that engineering does not sell products. Cool sells products. And Noel Lee knew that he was not cool. He needed a partner. At the same time in Los Angeles, a music executive named Jimmy Iovine was having a crisis. Jimmy was the head of Interscope Records. He was the man behind Tupac and Eminem and Lady Gaga. But the music industry was dying. Napster and piracy were destroying CD sales. Jimmy was looking for a lifeboat. He was looking for hardware. One day, Jimmy Iovine was walking on the beach with Dr. Dre. Dre was frustrated. His lawyer had just told him he should launch a line of sneakers. Dre looked at Jimmy and said, "Forget sneakers. Let's sell speakers." This was the moment the universe aligned. Jimmy Iovine knew Noel Lee. He knew the cable guy was desperate for a partnership. So Jimmy set up a meeting. Noel Lee walked into Interscope Records carrying his heavy prototype headphones. He placed them on the table in front of Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine. He was nervous. These were the kings of cool, and he was just an engineer. Dre picked up the headphones. He put them on. He played a track called Indie Club by 50 Cent. Noel held his breath. He watched Dre's face. Dre closed his eyes. He started nodding his head. Then he took the headphones off and looked at Noel. He said simply, "That is the sound." It was the perfect marriage. Noel Lee had the hardware. Dr. Dre had the image. They shook hands. They decided to form a partnership. But the details of that partnership are where the trap was set. They signed an agreement. The deal was that Noel Lee's company Monster would do everything. Monster would engineer the headphones. Monster would manufacture them in their factories in China. Monster would handle the shipping and the distribution to stores like Best Buy. Monster would take all the financial risk. If the headphones failed, Noel Lee would lose millions. Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine would provide the marketing. They would allow their names to be on the box. They would get the product into music videos. In exchange for doing all the heavy lifting, Monster would get a percentage of the profits. But the ownership of the brand Beats Electronics would belong to Dre and Jimmy. Noel Lee signed the contract. He was so happy to finally be in the big leagues that he ignored the fine print. He ignored the fact that he was building a house on land that he did not own. The headphones launched in 2008. They cost $300. The critics laughed. They said nobody would pay $300 for headphones in the middle of a global recession. They said the bass was too heavy and it drowned out the vocals. The audiophiles hated them, but the audiophiles were wrong. The kids didn't want flat, accurate sound. They wanted to feel like they were in a club. They wanted the bass to rattle their skulls. And the marketing was brilliant. Jimmy Iovine didn't spend money on billboards. He just called in favors. Suddenly every artist on Interscope was wearing Beats in their music videos. Lady Gaga wore them. Lil Wayne wore them. will.i.am wore them. It was a subliminal bombardment. Then came the masterstroke, the 2012 Olympic Games in London. Panasonic was the official sponsor of the Olympics. They paid millions for that right. But Jimmy Iovine didn't care about rules. He sent a team to London with suitcases full of Beats headphones painted in the colors of the different national flags. They stood outside the athlete village and gave them away for free to the most famous athletes in the world. The next day, Michael Phelps walked out to the pool wearing Beats. LeBron James walked onto the court wearing Beats. The cameras flashed. The images were beamed to billions of people. Panasonic was furious, but it was too late. Beats had hijacked the Olympics. Sales exploded. The company went from zero to $500 million in revenue in just a few years. Noel Lee was making money. His gamble had paid off. He was the manufacturing partner for the hottest brand on earth. He felt like a genius. But while Noel was celebrating the engineering success, Jimmy Iovine was plotting a financial maneuver that would leave Noel with nothing. The trap was hidden in the contract. It was a clause known as a change of control provision. It is a standard piece of legal text that usually protects companies if one partner gets bought out. But in the hands of a shark, it is a weapon. The clause stated that if the ownership of Beats Electronics changed hands, then Beats had the right to terminate all agreements with Monster. It meant they could fire Noel Lee and take all his designs and all his manufacturing data and walk away. In 2011, Jimmy Iovine made a deal with a Taiwanese phone maker called HTC. He sold 51% of Beats to HTC for $300 million. On the surface, this looked like a great payday, but it was a Trojan horse. By selling 51% to HTC, the ownership had technically changed. The change of control clause was triggered. This gave Beats the legal weapon they needed, but they didn't fire Monster immediately. They waited. A year later, in 2012, Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre did something strange. They bought back half of the shares they had sold to HTC. They took back control of the company. Now they had cash from HTC, and they had control. And they decided it was time to cut the cord. They told Noel Lee that the partnership was over. They exercised the clause. They told Monster that their services were no longer required. Noel Lee was stunned. He argued that he was the father of the product. He argued that he had built the distribution network. He argued that without him there would be no Beats. But the contract didn't care about feelings. The contract said they were out, and it got worse. Because of the way the intellectual property rights were structured, Monster had to hand over everything. The blueprints, the tooling, the engineering specs. Beats found a new manufacturer to make the headphones cheaper. They took Noel Lee's invention, and they simply gave it to someone else to build. Noel Lee was cast out of the kingdom he helped build. He lost the revenue stream that made up a huge portion of his company's income, but he still had his pride. He told himself that at least he had made some money along the way. But the final knife in the back was yet to come. In 2014, the rumors started swirling. Apple was looking for a way to get into the music streaming business. They were also looking for a cool brand to revitalize their image. Jimmy Iovine began secret talks with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. The deal they cooked up was astronomical. Apple agreed to buy Beats Electronics for $3.2 billion. When the news broke, the world saw Dr. Dre celebrating. They saw the headlines about the first hip-hop billionaire. They saw the genius of Jimmy Iovine. Noel Lee saw a robbery. If he had still been a partner, his share of that deal would have been worth over $500 million. Instead, he got zero. He watched the technology he developed in his lab being sold for the GDP of a small country. Noel Lee was furious. He sued. He filed a lawsuit claiming that Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine had committed fraud. He claimed that the HTC deal was a sham. He argued that they only sold to HTC temporarily just to trigger the clause so they could fire him before the big Apple payday. He called it a corporate sham. He said they conspired to steal his life's work. The trial was ugly. The lawyers for Beats were ruthless. They argued that Noel Lee was a grown man who signed a contract. They argued that business is business. They painted Noel Lee not as a victim, but as a bitter ex-contractor who was upset that he missed the boat. In 2016, the verdict came down. The judge looked at the contract, the judge looked at the timeline, and the judge ruled in favor of Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine. The court said that while the tactics might have been aggressive, they were perfectly legal. Noel Lee had signed the paper. The change of control was real. The termination was valid. The lawsuit was thrown out. And to add insult to injury, the court ordered Monster to pay Beats $135 million in legal fees and damages. Noel Lee didn't just lose the $3 billion deal, he lost his own money trying to fight it. Today, if you walk into an Apple store, you will see walls of Beats headphones. They are sleek, they are colorful, they are iconic, they are now fully integrated into the Apple ecosystem, they have Apple chips inside them. They are one of the most successful consumer products of the 21st century. But if you look closely at the box, you will not see the name Noel Lee. You will not see the logo of Monster Cable. The history has been scrubbed clean. The story of Beats is often told as a triumph of hip-hop culture. It is told as the story of how Dr. Dre understood the streets better than the suits in Silicon Valley. And that is partly true. Dre and Jimmy were marketing geniuses. They understood that headphones were not audio equipment. They were fashion accessories. They were jewelry. They understood that people didn't want to hear the music, they wanted to be seen hearing the music. But the other side of the story is a darker lesson about the brutality of modern business. It is a lesson that engineering is not enough. You can have the best product in the world. You can have the best patents. You can have the best sound. But if you do not own the brand and if you do not control the contract, you are just a hired hand. Noel Lee made the classic mistake of the technician. He thought his value was in the wires and the magnets. He thought he was indispensable because he was the one who knew how to build the thing. He didn't realize that in the modern economy, the value is not in the manufacturing. The value is in the story. Dr. Dre didn't build the headphones. He probably couldn't even tell you how the circuit board works. But he built the story. He built the cool. And in the end, the cool was worth $3 billion and the wires were worth nothing. The heist was not performed with a gun and a mask. It was performed with a pen and a smile. It happened in a boardroom, not a bank vault. And it left the man who built the empire standing on the outside, looking in while the party raged on without him. So the next time you see a pair of Beats on someone's head, remember Noel Lee. Remember the man who wanted to save the world from bad audio. He succeeded in changing how the world listens to music, but he paid a price that most of us can only imagine. He learned the hard way that in the jungle of business, you are either the one setting the trap or you are the one stepping into it. I am Alex, and you have been watching The Untold Path. If you found this story valuable, consider subscribing to the channel. We dig deep into the archives to bring you the business lessons they don't teach in school. Your support helps us keep the truth alive.